Okay, I'll call to order the meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Emmons,
Yes.
Brown,
Here.
Here.
Hazen,
Here.
Jacobson, Miller,
Yes, here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
And first, we have approval of minutes from the previous meeting, June 26th, 2017. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ammons, second
Aye, Miller and
Miller.
Woodsman.
Any corrections? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, for public input, I have several people. A couple people are here just to answer questions about the ordinance for the one-way on Anderson Street. Donald and Brian Anderson, so they'll be here later, but they don't want to speak necessarily right now. Esther Pat?
Hi, thank you. I'm Esther Pat. I live at 706 South Kohler Avenue. I'm also a former city council member, and I'd like to share with you a few of my thoughts about some of the changes you're talking about for council rules and the city code. First, I'm delighted to see that, I don't know why in 2005 you took out of, or that council took out of the city code the choice of city council members being called city council member, which had been the law for 30 years, and replace it with alderperson, which most people won't use. But I'm glad to see you're putting it back, but I noticed in the draft it says council member. And I strongly recommend you change that to city council member. There are lots of councils of which a person can be a member. There's only one city council member, and that's your position. Second, on the rules for canceling or rescheduling committee of the whole meetings, the way you have it formatted in the proposal in the packet is that you describe how a meeting can be canceled or rescheduled, a city council meeting, and then you say for the committee of the whole it's the same thing, which means probably inadvertently you're giving the mayor of the city of Urbana the power to cancel your committee meetings. And I won't go into the long history of this, but just Urbana is not Champaign. You have a form of government where the mayor has veto power, and every single employee of the city works for the mayor, not for all of you, because the mayor is the head of the executive branch of government, and the council is the legislative branch, and that committee is your committee. And no disrespect to the mayor, Mayor Marlin, or to the previous mayor, but when we first created Committee of the Whole back in 1997, that mayor's original idea was to make it like study session, he would chair it. And I said, no, no, no. And it was really just, the whole reason we had Committee of the Whole was because when the council had 14 members, we had a bunch of committees, I don't know, it was 5 or 6, with 5 members each. And when, by referendum, the council size was cut to 7 members, that just wasn't workable, so they created 2 standing committees, each with its own chair, who was chosen by the city council, standing chair. One was, and they just combined the stuff. One was administration and finance and something else, and another was legislation and environment. But and actually, the mayor never attended the committee meetings, and usually Mayor Markland didn't attend when the committee meetings were made up of all 7 council members. Mayor Satterthwaite started attending them, and he thought it was unworkable to have to pick which of to wait 3 weeks to put something for finance on when there was an upcoming meeting of the committee, but it was supposed to be environment and land use, and we all agreed with that. So thought we'd just make it one committee, but like I said, he suggested study session he chaired. What we went with was Committee of the Whole, and I suggested rotating the chair, and I hope you like it because I think it worked out well when I was on there. So anyway, I would just, it's important to maintain your status, your legislative status, as long as the mayor has those special executive rights that they don't have in the council manager form of government. So I encourage you to change that so that the mayor cannot cancel or reschedule your meetings. And finally, and I think this is a really important point. I was very unhappy to see under the council rules the proposal that anytime a council member wants to bring anything to the city, before a committee, they ask the item to be put on the agenda, and then they bring their draft to the staff who rewrite it for them to put it in the packet. And I know it doesn't say rewrite it for them, it says format it, blah, blah, blah. I think that's just absolutely terrible, and that's, again, giving up. The council does not work for the mayor doesn't work for the council, and I don't think your stuff should have to be vetted before the public sees it. And when I was on city council, if it was something, there was even a chance the administration didn't support, you betcha members did not do that. We wrote our own thing, we put it in the packet as is. I don't think there was ever a time the city council, the body would would by majority vote pass anything, like pass an ordinance without having the staff, change it for formatting and whatnot. But when it first comes to committee, if Dennis Roberts wants to just write up what he thinks should be a law and stick it in the packet, it should go in the packet, and the press and the public should see it. And then other members and the staff can all rip it apart. But the idea, if you have the right to put something on the agenda, you should have the right to put your own information in the packet, and that should not be screened by anyone. So I hope you will make that change. And you could probably, if what you were trying to accomplish was saying that y'all aren't going to vote on anything for real until it's been properly formatted, then you say that. But no item will be, just leave it that any council member can, I don't have the words in front of me, but that any council member can propose an agenda item, put the information in the packet, that and that the information, and that the council cannot approve any, will not approve any ordinance until it's been properly formatted by the legal department. It was my personal experience when I was a council member. This is nothing against the current mayor or current staff, but it was my experience that actually that sometimes things got changed significantly, and the change is. And basically it's political, but not political as in partisan political, but it's about difference of opinion, and I think you should at least have an opportunity to put yours forward first. That is a much better way of doing it. Thank you.
Good
Any
timing.
questions? I didn't think so.
Any questions for Esther?
Esther, do you know to which specific sections of the ordinances you're referring to?
Yeah,
I
have numbers in front of
got
me.
the one for the city council member.
Oh, you have the one for city council member, and the second one was about canceling committees, and that's also in the ordinance, not the resolution, and that is number, it's C, what is this? It's,
number
where's
five.
it?
Rule number
Section
5.
2, I'm sorry, section 2.25 under meetings, C, but Charlie's pointing out to me, maybe the city clerk's pointing out I got something wrong. A meeting of the committee of the whole may be canceled or rescheduled in the same manner as a meeting of the city council, except that where written communications required from the city council members, such communication should be required of committee of the whole members, and where communication is required from the members, such communication should be required of the then sitting chair of the committee of the whole. All right, well, you think that's saying then that the mayor can't do it?
It's the chair of the committee.
Okay, all right, then forget that. And the third one is in the resolution the third one's in the resolution, which is your council rules, and that is
Rule number 5, I think.
number 5. Thank you, yeah, rule number 5, draft resolutions and ordinances presented by alderpersons and committee members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I got it. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Esther.
Okay, next we have Bishop King James Underwood. Wanted to make a presentation.
Hello, I'm Bishop King James Underwood, and I have a presentation to Mr. Dennis Roberts. We heard about all the good work they was doing in Malawi, so we decided that we would contribute to the project they was doing over in Malawi. And from the church, we are presenting a check, and from the Underwoods, Dr. Evelyn Underwood and myself to the project. Well, I would like to present it to Mr. Roberts at this time.
Great, and then I want to comment on it. If you don't mind, pick up the check. Thank you very much, Bishop. Appreciate it so much. Okay, I'm going to make a comment.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. Yeah, so I do appreciate receiving 2 envelopes here from Bishop King James Underwood and Evelyn Underwood personally, and also from the New Hope what is your church called, sir, Mister? It's New Hope Baptist, New Free Will Baptist Church. As you know, the Sister City program sponsoring a trip of 3 of us to go to Malawi to do some more humanitarian work in the Guardian Village next to the hospital. And we're going to be also stopping at 3 elementary schools where we previously had built toilets for the students. And Scotty Dossett, who's kind of like the real engine behind this particular trip because of his love for the community down there in Malawi and his interest in improving the cooking, the habitat for the cooking stoves that's at the Guardian Shelter by introducing the construction of rocket stoves. It's a more efficient kind of brick cooking fireplace. So he's placed a fundraising, he opened a fundraising site on GoFundMe.com called Concrete for the Guardian's Feet. I think he made it rhyme for some reason. Concrete for the Guardian's Feet. It's still open, and we have maybe $1,500 more to raise before we actually complete the full project. But we're committing to it already, and this amount helps a lot. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll be leaving August 8th to the 19th. And I'll report back when we get back.
Thank you. Then I have 2 others from people that do not wish to speak. Bishop King James Underwood chooses not to address the members, but asks his position be entered into the record as follows. We are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. And Eldris Melinda Carr chooses not to speak, but is continually concerned about Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues, equity, and historic impact. So thank you. Now, do we have any presentations? None listed. Staff reports? Any additional staff reports? I think we took care of all those at the first meeting. So first we have ordinance number 2017-07-036, an ordinance amending Schedule F of Section 2382 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code designating one-way streets and alleys. Anderson Street, Public Works, Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Schunkweiler, Assistant City Engineer. What you have before you is an ordinance from August 1st, 2017 to August 1st, 2018. The school district is requesting that Anderson Street be directed northbound in the morning between 7:30 and 8:30, and in the afternoon between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m., Monday through Friday on school days only. This work or this change was requested by the school district while renovations occur at Yankee Ridge Elementary School. This item was brought forth to the Traffic Commission, and the Commission recommended the establishment of this temporary one-way street be sent to the Council for consideration. We have 2 representatives from the school district here to answer questions. Should you have that, we have Don Owen, the superintendent, and Brian Anderson, the principal for Yankee Ridge.
Are there any questions for Craig or for the school representatives? Mary Alice.
So I was reading the ordinance, and I noticed that the date was from August 1st of 2017 to 2018, and in your presentation you said only during school days. But I don't see that in the ordinance. Is that something that should be included in the ordinance, or did I overlook it?
That is a good point. I don't see that as well. But it should be only Monday through Friday, only when school is in session, yes.
Yeah, in Section 1, under listed days, it says Monday through Friday.
Right.
Right.
But it doesn't say when school's in session.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, the intent would be, say the school is out of session, and it's a Monday through Friday, that wouldn't be in effect. So, yes, there would be suggested to have an amendment to that ordinance.
Okay. Is that something that can be updated for? Okay.
Are you making
Do I have to make
When
a-
we forward it, we could say with that change or something. Are there any other questions? Any discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to move this forward to council with recommendation for approval, conditional upon the inclusion of language to specify on school days
Second.
in the ordinance.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next one is also a traffic issue. Ordinance number 2017-07-037, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, Division Avenue.
What you have before you is an ordinance restricting parking on the east side of Division Avenue between the eastern leg of the intersection of Thompson Street and Division Avenue and 90 feet south of the eastern leg of the intersection of Thompson and Division. Basically, there were concerns brought forth by residents that live on Thompson Street about vehicles parking at the vicinity, the east leg or the south leg of Division at Thompson, restricting site. Engineering Division investigated that. We have a procedure where we look at the, basically it's a site triangle to make sure that there's appropriate spacing there. We found that there was not, so, and there was no signage. So that's what this ordinance does, is it basically prohibits parking on the 90 feet on the south leg east side of Division Street at Thompson.
Any questions for Craig? Yeah, Aaron?
So, Craig, I'm trying to envision Division Street in Thompson, and you're saying that the current parking is creating a hazard of vision concern
That's
for
correct.
oncoming traffic or something?
Yeah. If you wish, I can show you a picture if I can get.
That would be helpful for me.
I'll let the birth control talk.
Charlie, you having some control issues over there?
So this would be an example here. Right here, we're sitting on Thompson Street, looking to the south on Division. This is the area in question. So as a car pulls up heading westbound, they are having difficulty seeing the oncoming traffic because of these vehicles that are parked here. So what we're talking about is restricting this area for a distance of 90-some feet.
So the cars are, I mean, you can
The-
see pretty good there, don't you think?
Well, as you pull up through here, you cannot, yeah. And actually, the city code addresses some of this, that, you know, we don't want to have parking adjacent to an intersection for safety reasons. What we have, though, is we need to have signage or the actual ordinance in place to be able to enforce that, for parking enforcement, to enforce the parking prohibition.
So that parcel of land is a Habitat house, right?
That is correct.
And so that land there, is that all belong to the home, or does the city own a portion of that?
The prohibition would be along where it would be within the city's right-of-way. Yes, the
No, I'm
city's
saying the
property.
signage. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to put signage up. Would we have the right to just put a sign right there in this person's yard?
We would put it within the city's property. So that would be along this area where the arrow is through here.
So outside of the grass or whatever?
Let me give you another example. This is looking to the east here. There are currently, I'll zoom in a little bit here, move down. There's no parking this side of street at these two signs here also. And there were also brought forth concerns about cars stacking along this side. So what you might consider is this is the first step in addressing a safety concern. So that would be to put the ordinance in place on Division. We already have an ordinance on Thompson Street. The second one would be for parking enforcement to approach the Habitat houses. What used to be here was basically an abandoned church. So then the homes were built, and then obviously there's use at those single-family homes. So they would approach the people and let them know, hey, you know, there already is parking and a prohibition on Thompson, but we'd also have it on Division here, and then hope for compliance. If not, then there would be issues, or tickets started to issue. It could come to the point where, for instance, where this white car is, the city could come in and remove the gravel parking. We're hoping we won't have to go to that level, but that could come about to keep the parking from occurring there.
So if it's gravel parking, but it's no parking, the sign says no parking, so
Right.
it's not,
The gravel parking was not put in by the city. It was put in by evidently the property owner.
oh. So it wasn't established as a part of, so the owner has a driveway, though?
Yeah,
The
if you
home.
see the second car back here, there's a driveway here, and same thing with the other house. There are
But-
driveways, yes.
So are any of the other vehicles, I mean, the other cars on Division or on Thompson there, those people are allowed to park on the street, though?
This
front of their
this car
homes.
is illegally parked right now.
Right,
This
but I'm
one.
saying any other the houses on the rest of the street, and even leading up to the house on the north side of the street, directly across from this particular house, are they allowed to park on the street?
There are no parking prohibitions on the north side of the street. So the restriction is on the south side of the street currently, not on the north side. And that was in effect actually prior to these homes being built.
Okay, so it makes sense for me to think about how the car is on Division, creating some sort of obstacle or light,
Excuse me, you mean Thompson, which is this street here, right?
no, I'm saying on Division. If I'm coming
Okay.
up to the stop sign on,
There's
on
no
t-
stop sign, so there's no traffic control at this intersection.
well, this just gets better by the minute. This,
Right.
so, but I'm still approaching the intersection on, I'm on Thompson coming up to Division, going west, right?
Right.
I can understand the line of sight being blurred or being blocked by vehicles parked on Division, so maybe I can't see oncoming traffic. But I don't understand why a person wouldn't be able to park in front of their own home on Thompson, because if you go up to the intersection, you can see oncoming traffic. I don't understand why parking on Thompson is some sort of block for the driver who's trying to enter onto Division. That doesn't,
So this diagram here would be an overview of the situation at hand. This is Thompson. North is straight up. The previous picture was taken here looking to the south. So this hatched area by city code with
the
the site
triangle.
triangle is the site triangle. So you can see this gravel area in here. This would be the parking restriction area. That's what's under consideration today. So what happens when you have
so,
a...
I'm sorry, Craig, so you're saying that, for my clarity's sake, any of this graphed area here with the designs, the shapes here, is all, you can't park in that area, period?
By the city code, that would be the limits of the site triangle. But we have to then take it one step further and enact an ordinance restricting the parking.
Dennis?
Yeah, one of the problems here is that we have, Thompson's not an intersection where the streets align. You've got a jag in the street alignment, and I think that's acerbating the problem for site, because if they aligned better, there would be, the site triangle would probably be smaller. It would be a diamond instead of a trapezoid.
Well, the alignment actually doesn't affect the size of the site triangle. What
No.
affects it would be the speed limit along Division and along Thompson, which is 30 miles an hour by de facto, meaning there's no exactly signage out there. So it's 30 miles an hour. There is, as you approach an intersection here, there's no traffic control, which means that you actually need to be able to react as you approach the intersection. So that means you have to yield, you have to recognize, you have to yield and slow down. So as a result of that, that's why this point is, point B over here is at this point here, okay?
Right, I'm just saying that it's more complex because the streets don't align, and you actually have to make an S curve to continue your journey, so that's a more complex driving experience than just crossing the intersection straight. And so I would see that, yeah, the site, you'd want to have a clear sight triangle down the street before you maneuver into the street that way.
So really, this is, I mean, we're bringing it forth from the Traffic Commission because it was considered to be a safety issue.
Jared?
Craig, I imagine maybe, Aaron, the way I'm seeing it is like, it's like one of those things where you're pulling up with a bunch of cars parked on the street, and you got to put your nose into the street to be able to see around them to see if anybody's oncoming. Because, like, from that picture, he's rolling up. You know what I mean? And you can see at that point, but by the time you get up to the edge of the road, you're like, you got to pull into the street to actually see the left or see
Right.
south.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Dean?
Is there not a hill on Division that's kind of making it worse? So if you're coming northbound on Division, aren't you kind of coming over a hill crest, which exacerbates the problem?
There is a slight rise to the north, but it's farther down.
It's further south?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
you know, let me go back to this other. So it's really relatively flat within this zone here to the south. I don't have a picture to the north, but that's not within, the hill rise is not within this zone here.
But if you're coming at 30 miles per hour or better, that might play into it.
It could
because
play into it,
Come
yeah.
up over the hill
Yeah.
going 30, 35.
Yeah.
It might, you didn't see Thompson from as far back as you could have had there not been a hill, is my thinking. So that's all. I'm just adding
Yeah.
to it.
So as I mentioned before, right now, there are current parking prohibitions on the south side of Thompson. So that is already, there's already an ordinance for that. What we're talking about is just this piece here. Let me see if I have another. Oh, I don't have that picture.
It's in our packets.
Right. Right. Right, so it's right within this red area here. That's what we're talking about today.
Oh, Aaron?
So I'm not trying to disagree necessarily with, I understand what you're saying by city ordinance, you have to have this triangle. I'm concerned about a homeowner who's basically having, parking for guests and stuff cut down, and there's no restrictions on the north side, but there are restrictions on the south side. Don't we have the same concern of traffic coming from the north traveling south on Division? Why wouldn't there be restrictions on the right-hand side, on the north side of the street, if there are restrictions on the south side of the street? It's just not adding up to me. I'm trying to understand why there isn't a balance there, and why can't we just put a stop sign there?
Okay, two things. We can put a stop sign, but if stop sign, we still would have a side triangle.
I get it. I
Okay,
understand.
so that would change the dimensions of the triangle from what it is shown there in the analysis.
Would it shrink it?
It would pull it into the west, yes. It would pull that way, but the long length probably would not change. So there
It would
would be.
still
so-
eliminate that parking, though, that you were
yeah,
talking about.
There would still be some parking restrictions there. The prohibition to the north was not brought forth because the issue that was brought to the Traffic Commission was the prohibition to the south. So when we receive complaints within the engineering division, we typically will address the situation at hand. We're not out trying to look at all four corners. Sometimes we do, but only if there's an apparent safety issue, meaning that there was no, we went out several times, we didn't see parked cars to the north, we didn't see vegetation obstructing. That's when we'll get involved with analyzing, and we've done that before where we've said, well, there's a bush too on that corner as well, we need to restrict that or remove that bush. We could certainly add the parking prohibition to the north, but that wasn't the issue at hand. The issue was, the concern was parking to the south.
Well, when we talk about safety concerns,
Mhm.
to me, it just seems principled that if I'm driving west on Thompson and trying to get onto Division. If I have a problem looking left, then I'm gonna probably have a problem looking right.
Okay. Well, we can certainly, add that in the ordinance between now and the city council's vote.
I'm just trying to see if it's even necessary, first of all. I think the stop sign seems to bring some resolution to a safety concern because it slows the driver down,
Mhm.
and you would still have the parking concerns. I get that. If you can't see, you can't see, right? And I understand your position that when you went out to look at it, you only see cars on this side, and maybe people aren't parking on that side, right? But
Mhm.
I would imagine if the neighbors here at, what's that, 1401 had an event, maybe somebody parks on the east side of Division and would create a hazard for somebody coming down Thompson Street,
Yeah, that's a good point.
you know? So I'm just, I'm not trying to make an issue out of something that's not there, but I do want everyone to have, sort of be treated equally here. And I'm really concerned about this person who lives at 301 in a new Habitat home, having their parking diminished. What if they wanted to have guests or something over where people are supposed to park? So. And while, I'm sorry, and while I have you here talking about obstructions of sight, lines of sight,
Yes.
the bush that I have been talking about that's in the parking lot of the family video, right on the corner of Lincoln and Fairview, has been, when you pull out of the parking lot, out of the family video onto Lincoln Avenue, when you're trying to look to the north and look to the south, that bush right there, that big huge bush, creates a problem for anybody walking or riding their bike on the sidewalk on the west side of the street and trying to pull out into the traffic. That's only like the fourth time I brought it up.
Okay, that's the
Okay.
first I've heard of it, but we'll
All right,
certainly.
well, I'm gonna get billed for that one then.
All right,
All right.
but we will, I will tell you, we will look into it then.
I
Do you have
want
any other
cut down.
locations?
That's what I want, so we can see and not have an accident there. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one option is you send it back to the traffic commission. I mean, this ordinance could be sent back and further investigated, this corner. That's another option.
Craig, as far as notification goes, was 301 and 303 notified that this was being discussed at Traffic Commission or that it would be discussed tonight?
What happened at traffic commission, so the short answer is no. What the procedure would be that there was a concern raised by a resident on Thompson. The commission discussed it. They looked and saw that there was basically a missing piece of the corner for prohibition. At that point, then, and we don't notify residents when it's a safety concern because it's a safety concern. It's not, let's elicit whether or not it's okay or not. It's basically, per engineering judgment, or engineering procedures, there's a safety concern. At the point that the prohibition goes in, though, and the parking enforcement, when we talked to Beth Beatty, she would notify the residents and say, hey, there's now, we're looking to enforce Thompson, we're looking to enforce the corner, please comply, first with a letter, and then go from there.
And then, are there any other restrictions on Division on the east side, south of that red line? I mean,
Not in the vicinity there. When you get close to the Circle Academy, there is some restrictions down there due to the school. But
at
that's
their
a
driveway?
block or a couple blocks away.
So there's quite a bit of space there for guests and things. Just
Yeah.
They'd have to walk further.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? What's the desire of the committee? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we send it back to Plan Commission just for one more good look at it.
Traffic Commission.
Traffic Commission for one more good look at the north or southbound traffic from the north on Division.
Is there a second to
Yeah,
that?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Jared, seconded by Roberts. Any more discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Greg.
Next, we have resolution number 2017-07-044R, a resolution approving a supportive housing program subrecipient agreement with Courage Connection for FY 2017-2018 community development. Matt.
Yeah, the issue before the committee of the whole tonight is, hold on.
I don't think the mic's on.
The light's on. Oh. Can you hear me? There we go. Oh, sure. So the subrecipient agreement tonight would allow the city to receive funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, then pass those funds along to Courage Connection as part of the as part of their domestic violence families in transition project. And these funds would reimburse Courage Connection's expenses with regards to case management services, outreach, housing placement, as well as other expenses like operations and administrative expenses. And this specific grant for this year was, the city was notified about it on December 20th of last year. And we recently signed an agreement with HUD to receive the funding into the city on June 8th. But now we need to have an agreement in place to convey that funding along to Courage Connection, and that's the issue before us tonight with the subrecipient agreement. There has also been discussion between HUD, city staff, and Courage Connection about transferring direct administration of the grant to Courage Connection. That is something that we hope to transfer to Courage Connection sometime next year, but in the meantime, we still need to be able to operate this grant and convey the funds to Courage Connection, and that's the sole issue at this time, and that's the purpose of the subrecipient agreement here. The Community Development Commission voted by a vote of 7-1 to forward this resolution to the Urbana City Council with recommendation for approval. There'd be no direct fiscal impact on the city general fund, as all funds in question, which totals $80,036, are federal grant funds. The funding would fit in with the Urbana Home Consortium and City of Urbana Consolidated Plan in terms of supporting agencies that in turn support homeless individuals and families, in particular survivors of domestic violence. And the city staff does recommend that the Committee of the Whole forward the resolution approving the supportive housing program grant agreement with Courage Connection to the Urbana City Council with a recommendation for approval. And I'd be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Are there any questions? Mary Alice.
Yeah, I have two questions. My first one is there's lots of talk about the administration, the move of the administration funds. And so in the agreement, it says the administration is $4,665. That's the amount that was in question, because then over here in the minutes, it says $3,000 in administrative funds.
That was, I was just sort of giving an estimate in the minutes of the CDC, but it was, the agreement it includes a total of, did you say, was it 45?
Yeah, it's $4,665.
So that's the whole pot of funds that can be used for administrative expenses. And as we've done in the past, we split that with Courage Connection.
Okay.
And on page 3 of the memo, this year we would keep 1,866 of those dollars for administrative expenses. The rest would, or the balance of that would go to Courage Connection.
I guess I'm confused because I thought that the thought was that they are not yet ready to take on the administrative costs. Is that correct?
Well,
the administrative duties, rather, that would justify the administrative costs.
they do have staff in place, which is why they are willing to take on administration of the grant, but that's not going to take place until next year. So in the meantime, we would split the administrative costs, but they do have staff who handle grants very similar to this, and they can work with many of the requirements and meet the requirements that this grant would offer, which is why we are willing to pass that along and why they are willing to accept responsibility for it.
Okay. And then my second question had to do with the discussion about what would happen if Courage Connection became insolvent. So during the meeting minutes, they said that they would talk with HUD about the situation, and I was wondering if you had any updates on that.
So what would happen if there's a couple of different scenarios that could play out. If the grant is not transferred and we retain control of it and Courage Connection still goes under, what we would have to do is either find another agency to take on that exact project, or it would have to go back to the Champaign County Continuum of Care as a new project, and it would have to compete with other projects and be voted on by their process. And yeah, it's hard to say if there would be another agency that's local that would be able to take on that exact project if they went under. But that's sort of the process that we're dealing with here. If we do relinquish control of the grant and allow Courage Connection direct administration and they go under, then the funding amount that the Continuum of Care is given does not change, but that project is not included in the different projects that they can allocate funding to. So it's just one fewer option in the pool of projects that that are allocated funding. Is that
I guess I
clarify?
don't understand the last piece. So,
Okay.
so if we relinquish control and they have total administrative, they're doing the grant on their own, and they go under,
Mhm.
then I thought what you said was that the funds go back to,
No,
They just
the
keep
funding
the
amount
funds.
stays the same. It's just that their project is out of the picture, and the funds are reallocated to a different project.
okay, but if they're given all the money, I guess maybe I don't understand how the grant works.
And that's that. I'll take a step back. The supportive housing program funds are provided to continua of care around the country, and they in turn allocate which out of the block that HUD gives them of funding, they break off certain pieces and distribute to projects and allocate the priorities of those projects. The highest priority projects, for example, other local projects are Shelter Plus Care, that's operated by Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. Rosecrans has other projects. Those projects compete with projects like this one. In this case, this project was allocated funding and was given that funding. If this project were to cease to exist because Courage Connection went under, this option would not be there, but the funding that's granted locally to the Continuum of Care, that's not affected. So the funding would still stay in the county, but this project wouldn't be on the table.
Okay, I understand, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I had to work my way around that.
No, thank you.
Jared?
So the agreement's just for fiscal year 17-18, right?
That's correct.
Well, I just got email from Courage Connection earlier this year inviting me to a celebration because I don't know if it's record funding, but they achieved significant funding for this upcoming year. So I don't think there's really going to be much concern about them going under. I think they're going to be in a good position this year, Mary Alice.
If I recall correctly,
Just putting that out there.
I think it was 391,000
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
got in
Yeah.
fundraising.
I just didn't know what happened with the state budget. That's not their, yeah, anyway.
Well, that's secured from enough for them to announce it, so I don't think any of that's in question. It includes money the money we gave them as well.
And a very successful private fundraising
Yep.
effort.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions? How about a motion?
I'll make a motion to send this forward to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Aaron. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Matt. Next is ordinance number 2017-06-033, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 2, Sections 224, 225, and 227. City Clerk and Legal, who's going to take this? Jim?
I'll take it because Charlie is suffering from allergies. Most of this is an effort to clarify prior rules and to flesh out some of the procedures and mechanics by which the council and the committee operate. There are some changes that are clear. I mean, there's some rewrite, but that doesn't mean there are a lot of changes in there. If you look at, for instance, on the the first page of the resolution, Charlie asked me to include reference to council member. I wasn't here when that moniker was in, but apparently it was taken out of the rules at some point. And, you know, Esther may have a good point if you want to insert city council member instead of council member. These are city council and committee of the whole rules, so the presumption would be that a council member is a city council member, but you know, that's your call. The first sentence, just as a reminder that we are a mayoral aldermanic form of government. Some people have referred to us as a strong mayoral form of government. We aren't a strong mayoral form of government. To my understanding, only 2 communities in the state of Illinois are. But clearly, we're not a mayor-manager or council-manager form of government. That's what Champaign is. So that's the only reason for the initial provision. If you go on to the second page, where about the middle it starts with a regular scheduled meeting, that's been stricken and fleshed out with what is provided in B. And this provides for canceling and rescheduling meetings. And essentially what some of these changes throughout, including when you get to the rules, this is part of our ordinance, but when you get to the rules, it also is intended to provide, or to, shall we say, memorialize pretty much how you all actually function, regardless of what the rules actually say. There are, parts that are just not followed. So that's part of it too. Probably the more significant alterations are, to adopt rules that state how you function. It's much better to have rules that describe how you function than to have rules and then have you ignore the rules. You're better off with no rules at that point.
Jim, I had a question on that, on Part C about canceling the committee of the whole meeting. The last part of that sentence says, where communication is required from the members, such communication shall be required of the then sitting chair of the committee of the whole. Should that be, except they're talking about similarities, should that say mayor there?
I believe that was one of Esther's comments. In terms of a committee of the whole meeting, in the past, the mayor has canceled it. I mean, we'll sit on a Tuesday morning in executive staff meeting and we go through the agenda, and if there's nothing on the agenda for a committee of the whole meeting, we're advised that it will be canceled.
But I think if you read this, it says...
Can I ask that you speak up a little bit?
Okay. I think if you read through this, it says it can be canceled in the same manner as meeting the city council, except making the difference where the written communication is required from city council members, such communication shall be required of the committee of the whole members, just different titles. And where communication is required from the member, I think that should say mayor, rather, instead of the mayor, such communication would be required of the then sitting chair of the committee of the whole.
Right. You're looking at, see, a meeting of the committee of the whole may be canceled or rescheduled in the same manner as a meeting of the city council, except where written communication is required from the city council members. Such communication shall be required from the committee of the whole members. You want to put the mayor?
No,
Oh,
just keep going.
and where communication is required from from the member, such communication shall be required of the then sitting chair.
So instead of member there, should that say mayor? We're replacing the mayor with the then
Yeah,
sitting
I'll
chair.
I'll have to go back and look at it.
And then that would take
compared to
care of
the-
Esther's. I think that would take care of Esther's concern
Yeah.
because the mayor, instead of the mayor being able to cancel it, it should be the chair of the committee.
The concern, I think, and Esther does have a point, the mayor is not a member of the committee of the whole.
I think if we change member to mayor, that would address the
I mean,
concern.
I have no problem with that, if that's what you wish, because in fact, as I say, the mayor is the one, as a matter of practice, that typically cancels the meeting unless there's something that's that somebody one of you all brings up to be included on an agenda.
Mayor?
So this would be from the mayor to the chair of the committee, rather than the mayor to the city clerk for a council meeting. For a committee meeting, it would be, would the mayor be, are you saying the mayor would call the committee chair to cancel the meeting? Is that
Well,
the
no,
effect
the
of this?
communication would have to be required from the sitting chair of the, because to cancel a city council meeting, the mayor has to do it. But this is saying, except, it's kind of weird phrasing. Jim must have written this. To replace the member with
I
the
charge by the word.
I think if you replace member, the word member with mayor, it'll be saying that except, it's like the city council thing, except that instead of the mayor, the chair of the committee has to cancel it. And
What
so,
end
yeah,
up-
if there's nothing on the agenda or no business, then you'd have to contact the chair of the
Right,
committee.
that's what I'm saying.
Right.
This particular paragraph does not have a mechanism for the mayor to tell the committee chair, hey, there's nothing on the agenda. So there has to be, if you're going that route, you have to have a mechanism in there for the mayor to communicate with the city council, with the committee chair, to then cancel.
That there's
the meeting.
nothing on the agenda. Might it be more appropriate, because what this creates, I guess regardless of who does it, is a two-step process. It goes from the mayor to the chair to the members. Would it be, and again, that, there's no legal issue here, would it be more efficient if it went from the mayor to the chair and the
No,
members?
the mayor should be out. I mean, the mayor doesn't, it shouldn't, I mean, to cancel a committee of the whole, the mayor shouldn't have anything to do with it. And I think if you make that word changing, that'll take care of it.
But how
Because-
does the committee know if there's no agenda item?
Well, the people that are, I guess you guys in your staff meeting would tell the committee chair that there's nothing for agenda. Do you want to cancel the meeting? Then the chair would have the final decision. Well, maybe I want to put something on the agenda, or maybe I want to have a presentation, so I'm going to keep the meeting. Or they can cancel it.
Either way makes sense. I mean,
Okay.
that makes sense.
But the communication has to be to the clerk. So
Through the clerk, okay.
somebody has to communicate with the clerk in the end. Does that make sense to other people if you change that wording?
Can do that.
Okay. Did you want to go on?
Bill.
Oh, Aaron.
So I won't say that I'm absolutely clear on the word change that you're offering. But if the committee is clear on the spirit of this, and we're very clear that we're not trying to give away our authority as chair of the committee of the whole or as the committee of the whole, then I'm okay with the changes that are represented, that you're putting forth.
Did you have anything further on that section? Did you want to go on to the next section, or?
I have nothing further on that. If there's a consensus in terms of what I guess committee member Ammons is recommending some statement in here that nothing herein shall be deemed as waiving the committee of the whole's authority. I mean, you have a practice on how you operate. I don't see this changing that practice. I don't see this invading the authority of the committee. The only thing I see this with Alderman Brown's suggestion is a mechanic in terms of how a meeting is canceled. Because in the city clerk's office and the mayor's office, typically the mayor gets calls from people, whether the staff needs something considered by the committee so it can advance, or one of you all, or more than one of you all, typically, as I understand it, because it comes to us in the executive staff meeting that way, that somebody wants something on the agenda. If there's nothing on the agenda, the mayor is going to probably know before anyone.
I think there have been cases where council members will contact the chair of the committee of the whole and not tell the mayor right away that they want something on the agenda. So it's a way to check to make sure.
Well, at some point before the meeting, a council member, other than just as a mere discussion item, has to put something on the agenda, especially a council agenda, but committee is a little looser, but still. And then the question is, and I think we have an answer from PAC in terms of whether advancing something to the committee, to the council by the committee of the whole, for the committee constitutes a final action, and the PAC, Public Access Council, does not consider that a final action. But you're going to want that on the agenda, if nothing else, to let the public know that somebody, whether it's a committee member or somebody else, wants something on the agenda.
Yeah. And when we have committee of the whole meetings, we're always contacted on Thursday before the agenda comes out, the chair of the committee of the whole, to make sure, to approve the agenda. So at that point, you could still add something.
Yeah, on Thursday. I think the practice has been, and I think our city clerk is pretty much continuing the practice, they want in their office the title of the resolution or the ordinance or the discussion item by noon, so they can put the title on the agenda, and then the material for the packet, I think they want by 12 noon on Thursday, right?
Right, yeah.
So it can be included. So
we need the titles on Wednesday, by the end of business on Wednesday, and then we need the material for the packet by noon on Thursday. And even that's pushing it. We'd like to get the packets out on Thursday afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Dennis, did you have something additional?
Yeah, I was trying to wrap my mind around why you were adding, substituting mayor for the word member on the second to last sentence of the paragraph we're talking about, C, and I'm now understanding that it's part of the exception, and it's just stating that whereas on the city council, it's the mayor who makes the communication, that the communication will now be done by the sitting chair. I was wondering why you were trying to put the word mayor back into it, because it seemed like that you were giving authority to the mayor again, but I realize now that the word is, that it's because it's the exception to that practice. Okay, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
Finally got to me.
Okay, Jared?
Moving on to other things.
Um,
Is everyone satisfied with that?
I got one more.
Dennis?
So, Charlie, you were, and Jim, you were explaining the process by which an item is placed on the agenda. And it would be nice if there was a point-by-point list of how that takes place, so that it was very clear.
Yeah, could we keep the discussion of the rules, which is a separate resolution from this ordinance? We can concentrate on the ordinance first. And there's two pieces here, so that's in the resolution section next. So this is an existing section of the city code that needs to be changed. So in section 2.24, the composition section on page 1 of the ordinance, right now it's adding back in council member. Esther suggested city council member. What's your pleasure? Because we can bring it back to you whichever way you want.
Aaron?
City council member is my preference, and also, as I deal with the sexism within our society, I also think that the city operates under the mayor, alderperson form of government would be better than the aldermanic.
The reference in the Illinois Municipal Code is aldermanic. I have no problem with alderperson form of government, but the Illinois Municipal Code references as aldermanic form.
Home rule doesn't allow us to change
Yeah,
that.
it does, if you want to change. That's why I say, if you want to change it, I have no problem with that.
Okay,
He's just saying that we didn't make it up.
okay.
So you all will have to, the chair will have to ask for your consensus on that. In fact, all of
Okay.
these, there should be, whatever changes you want, it should be by consensus of the
Right.
committee.
So, mayor, alderman, so would we have to define mayor, alderperson?
Mayor, alderperson.
A mayor, alderperson form of government? Okay. Does anyone have an objection to replacing aldermanic with alderperson?
I object.
Dean objects.
I do not object.
Do you want to explain your objection, Dean?
Other than it's a monumental waste of our time now.
I
Okay.
guess that goes along with the rest of it then. So,
Then, would you like to vote on that, or?
yes, that's
Okay.
good. Are we voting on the alderperson form of government, the mayor, alderperson, as well as the city council member?
Okay, let's have a motion on the ordinance with the other two changes, and then we can amend the alderperson and see how that goes.
Okay.
So
Okay,
if I would entertain, the chair would entertain a motion to send this ordinance to city council with recommendation for approval with two changes to insert city before council member in section 224 and to replace member with mayor in the last part of section C, the underlined sentence.
okay, I'll make that motion so that we can open this up to discussion.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, that was moved by Roberts and seconded by Mary Alice. Now, would you like to offer an amendment to that, Aaron?
Yes, I would like to offer the amendment that in section 224, the city operates under the mayor, alderperson's form of government, as opposed to mayor, aldermanic form of government.
Is there a second to that motion?
Yes, I'll do that.
That's been the motion to amend by Aaron, seconded by Dennis. Is there any discussion on that? If not, we could take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
One. That motion carries. So that was the amendment. Now we're voting on the
There's
ordinance
one
as
more
amended.
consideration you might want to make in that. If you look at the second line, it says the mayor and the 7 aldermen. You might want to put alderpersons there.
Yeah, I make a motion that we change the line, in line 2, the 7 aldermen to 7 alderpersons to be consistent.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
It's been moved by Robert, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now we have the ordinance with all those changes, with the alderperson changes and the other two. Jared?
Am I to understand, Charlie, that section A under section 2 is going to be adjusted via our newfound knowledge of?
That's a different.
The
Or is-
resolution is completely different. This is simply indicates what the standard legal holidays are and when we meet on Tuesdays instead of Mondays.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay, so now we're voting to send the ordinance to the city council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Next, we have resolution number 2017-07-045R, resolution adopting city council and committee rules. Jim, are you going to take that?
Again, basically the same comments. The prior rules were less than clear in terms of practice versus how in fact you operated. So it looks like a lot of rewrite, and there is a lot of rewrite, but it's, again, basically to clarify and to, for the most part, conform with practice. And probably the best way of going through it is piece by piece, starting with rule number 1, agenda preparation. Now, somebody indicated that they would like a description of how, even before this, how something gets on the agenda. Again, that, as I described, the mechanics are, if staff has something like we had the Housing Authority issue, that was obviously not brought forward or suggested by a council person. That was somebody on CD staff, Matt, because this grant had to be dealt with and agreements had to be approved. But clearly that doesn't come from a committee member or a council member. So when we sit in executive staff, somebody says, well, we have this grant, or we have some intergovernmental agreement that needs to be approved, and it's placed on the agenda. The mayor places it on the agenda. And obviously she starts with the committee of the whole, and then it's advanced, if you all choose to advance it, to the council. I'm not sure that needs to be reflected in rules, because the mayor, at least from a staff perspective, has the sole authority whether she wants to put something that a staff person feels should be on the agenda. She could say, if she wanted to, no, I don't think that should be on the agenda. I don't think that, I've described it to you now, but I don't think that process needs to be in rules, because staff is not governed by council rules. We take our lead from the mayor.
So in section B, under committee of the whole meetings, item III, it says the request of 1/2 or more members of the committee of the whole. Are we supposed to pick one of those, 1 or 2?
Yeah, I think it's 2. That was a typo.
Okay, so that's 2.
Supposed to be 2.
Well-
Sorry about that.
Well,
Charlie?
no, I put the 1/2 in there to reflect what we were operating under the 2005 rules that Jack Waller provided us. It was, if a subject had never come up before, and if you look up to the strikeout in B, committee of the whole meetings, if an agenda item had previously listed on the agenda discussed within the last 90 days, then it required 2 members to bring it back to committee. And so during my 12 years on council, if one member of the council requested something to be put on an agenda for discussion or had the actual text, it went on if it was a new item. And that's how the rules read before. If you look back at the original 2005 appendix, that's what you'll see in those rules. It was one person could bring it up. It took 2 to bring something new, something up that had been previously discussed. And that was within 90 days. Champaign has a 60-day rule, and it requires
Majority or something?
some other majority. I can't remember now. But so it was 1 in the past. That was traditional. You could make it 2, but if you make it 2, then you may want to look down further, which says how many does it take to bring up something that's been discussed within the last 90 days or something. 2 and 2, it's sort of inconsistent. Because then you're saying it takes 2 to put something on the agenda, period, and you would strike that other section.
With the 90 days stricken, it would just be 2, no matter whether we discussed it before or not. So do people want to make that 2? So either the chair, the mayor, or 2 council members could place something on the committee of the whole agenda.
I'm okay with 2. But
Okay, let's make that 2 for now.
And then would you strike the other requirement then?
The 90 days,
You would, if it's takes two members, then the next paragraph, notwithstanding the foregoing, if an agenda item previously appeared, was discussed in the committee hall, but which no action was taken, it says at the request of two members of the committee of the whole.
It doesn't need to
Do you
be
want
there.
to, yeah, so do you want to strike that, or do you want to change that to 3 or additional members, or just strike it and just make it 2, period?
Dennis?
Well, you know, I didn't realize that one member could actually place an item up for discussion on the agenda. I thought that we were always going with 2, but I think that it's more empowering to us. We can bring items forward to our discussion without, you know, shopping for agreement, you know, previous to our discussion in the meeting. I think it would probably be wise for us to allow one person to bring forward something to the committee of the whole. That's a study session in itself. I'm not sure what we would gain by requiring 2 people to be required to place something on the agenda, unless the item had to be worthy enough in the mind of 2 people to bring it forward.
Mayor?
Well, in our my experience on the council, if we wanted to put something on the agenda, it usually, when we contacted the chair and asked that chair to be the second person, the chair was usually agreeable. So that's 2. That's 2 right there. So in practice, it worked with 2.
Jared?
And Dennis, I would say it's also seems kind of like the whole point of, you know, if you can't get a second on a motion for even to bring something up for discussion, then clearly there's not enough consensus to even consider it. So it's kind of the same thing there. You know what I mean?
Jim?
Assuming, and I don't mean to assume, but assuming you're following Robert's Rules of Order, you can place 1,000 things on your agenda, but normally before any debate, even in a committee, because it is a public body, before any debate occurs, normally it should receive a motion and a second. The two-person provision kind of leads into that, but if it's your call, there's nothing legal about this, you can put as many items as anyone can, or all of you can put items on the agenda, but if you're going to follow Robert's rules, there really should be no debate on any item that's up for some kind of action, moving it to council or whatever, or keeping it in committee until there's a motion and a second.
Anyone else? So I guess to answer Charlie's question about do people want to have any special requirements for a topic that had previously been on the agenda but no action was taken, or just leave that as also the same? Just if you find 2 people who want to put it back on there, it goes back on there.
Yes.
So we can strike that paragraph.
Yes.
I would agree. Strike it.
Okay. Were there any other concerns, or did you want to keep going through that, Jim?
I guess the next one would be order of meetings. Again, this is a reflection of what has occurred in the past. Again, it's just clarification in terms of scheduling meetings, in terms of between council meetings and committee of the whole meetings. An example of that, in fact, occurred tonight. We had a committee meeting, I guess, 2 weeks ago, and we were supposed to have a council meeting last week, which was canceled or rescheduled. But we had to have that council meeting this evening first before we could move into this committee of the whole. And I think the public policy, I wasn't here when that was originally created, but I think the public policy on that was so things would not be rammed through a committee and then 5 minutes later or 3 hours later, depending on how long the committee meeting goes, it's then rammed through a council meeting. want you all to deliberate on what you've done in a committee to consider what you're going to do in a council meeting. Especially when the meetings start running late and you start approving things quickly with limited or no debate.
Okay. Did you have anything to say on rule number 4?
Well, I'm not sure. I think we went from Rule
Number 3.
2.
Oh, 3.
I think
Debate
you're on
limits.
Rule 3. A lot of this is embodied in our rules, Rule 3, but I will tell you, as you all know, you don't follow this rule.
This is, for the sake of public at home, this is about debate limits and
Yes.
number of times people speak and for how
Right.
long.
I mean, there are many matters that come before you where committee members or older persons may speak 3, 4, 5 times on a matter. Some may want to respond each time somebody else says something. There are, you don't follow time limits. These pretty much follow what was there, but again, they're your rules, and if you choose to dispense with all of that, the debate limits, you'll be here for a long time, as you have been on many meetings, especially more recently in the last 8, 10 months. But again, that's, this is to control. You can always move to extend debate by another 5 minutes or allow somebody to speak a third time. Has to be by motion, second, and vote.
Any questions on that one? Okay, keep going.
Rule 4, this is the infamous resolution on resolutions. And essentially what this does is expand when things go directly to the council. As we know, currently resolutions go from the committee on recommendation, if there is one, either with or with no recommendation to the council, but that's how they go. But certain things come directly to the council: historic preservation, commission, recommendations to landmark something. Something which is not recommended for landmark, I believe, does not come here. Zoning matters, those kinds of things come here. And so rather than having them go to the committee, which they don't anyway, because our zoning ordinances and the historic preservation ordinance tells us where these items go. And that's basically to expand this, to allow that.
Mayor?
There's a typo in line 3. Resolution should be plural. Resolutions.
Right. Typo on, we're on line 3. I see it starts reso. I have RESOLUTION.
Should be plural.
Huh? Should be resolutions?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Aaron?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually go back to rule number 3, and to make sure we had clarity on the 5-minute. Does that mean that, are we going to go with the limit of twice on any issue as cut and dry? That's going to be the way that we limit the debate, is that each member can only speak twice, regardless if you speak for 1 minute or 2 minutes. I just want to make, I know this came up before, I don't know if we had an actual resolution to that, to make sure that we all understand how it will be going forward.
I'm not aware of, nobody's given me direction on, is somebody allowed 10 minutes, meaning they have a minute, and then second time they have 9 minutes, or 5 and 5, or some other combination, which is really what your question is. I've received no direction in drafting these on that.
Jared?
I would maybe propose that we could put in some sort of language to make it a and/or situation. Either if you meet either threshold then you have exceeded your time. So whether that's 10 minutes or 2 interjections, whether that's 5 minutes and or 2 interjections, we can put language in that says something to that effect. And that would make it clear that you can either speak twice or you can speak once for a really long time. And that's how you limit it. You see what I'm saying, Aaron?
Yeah, I guess it's 10 minutes either way it goes, whether it's, 1 minute or the first time and 9 minutes the second time. We're still talking about
Right.
having the opportunity to speak for about 10 minutes on any particular subject. I don't know that I agree with 5 minutes each time. I think that's quite a bit. We have, 7 council members. If everybody wanted to speak twice on each issue, we could be here for a very long time, 10 minutes each. So I would be more inclined to support something that says maybe that opening, at some point, you get maybe 2 or 3 on one point on one of those, and then you can get 5. But I wouldn't want us to have, sitting for 9 minutes, let one person just sort of filibuster,
I wouldn't be opposed to 5 minutes or twice. You know what I'm saying? You speak once and you speak for 5 minutes, that's it, that's all you get. Or if you want to speak twice, you speak once and it costs you a minute, and you speak the second time, it costs you 4 minutes. And then you reach there. What does everyone else think?
Charlie, how would this be administered? How do you feel about this?
I think keeping it at 5 minutes each time you speak makes it easy for me to keep track of the clock.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Having separate timings for each of you would require, 8 clocks. I think Robert's rules suggests 5 minutes per time, doesn't it?
I
know that
I don't recall
speaking
seeing that.
twice comes from Robert's rules.
Yeah, the speaking twice does. I don't recall whether 5 minutes, but that was going to be my comment. Somebody's going to have to be a scorekeeper of minutes.
Okay.
Maybe 3 minutes?
Dean?
Wasn't there something in there about if you were referred to by name, that you could respond, but if you weren't referred to by name, you weren't able to respond?
That
You
might be
challenged
in
your inner
Robert's
Mike
rules.
Madigan. Is
That
what
was a
you're
Mike
doing?
Madigan rule, but it may have been in Robert's rules.
Yeah.
Well,
It
I thought I
is.
saw it in writing
No,
at
it
some
is.
point, but I don't see it in this paragraph, or am I on a different procedure?
I think you're on either the House of Representatives or the Senate, or actually you're on presidential debate rules, which is what they did.
I thought I saw it in writing.
I don't recall that being in Robert's rules, but of course, hopefully, you all don't negatively comment about one of your colleagues up here on the dais.
I got lost there.
That part is in Robert's rules,
It
about
is.
negatively commenting on other members.
I thought I read it in our procedures at some point. No, I'm talking about referring to somebody by name, which enabled them to then respond, is what I'm talking about.
Right.
That might have been in minutes from, but I don't recall that from Robert's rules, but I can check it for next week. I'll look it up.
Dennis?
Well, it's interesting because we've just had here a conversation between 2 members to clarify something that each person took 2 or 3 responses to sort it out. And so if we're limiting ourselves to only 2 responses, unless we don't enforce this so that we can have actual dialogue over thorny problems, we're going to have difficulty in expressing ourselves and making intelligent decisions, I think.
There is a section C that allows members to ask questions of the public, city staff, or other person.
About each other.
I don't think it.
We
yeah,
might have to include, or other council
maybe
persons.
to ask for clarification or something. Yeah, Jared.
I think probably the better practice is, because you all sit here, to have a vote on whether to increase a person's time limit or to increase a person's number of time speaking or to increase debate, and have the committee of the whole or the council, as the case may be, vote on it, because maybe a majority is ready to take action or do what the next step involves.
I'm sorry, you guys have used up your 2 times. Are you, Charlie?
See how that works.
No, I think if you read section C, it allows public, city staff, or other person who's scheduled or who has requested to present information on an agenda item. So if you have a council member who is presenting the information and such, or in my case, the clerk is presenting information, then you can keep asking questions and clarification from that person. And that's just asking questions. That doesn't go in as part of your 2 times speaking.
Okay.
And again, I think these are general guidelines. They're only as rigid as you want to make them and enforce them.
Okay. Jared.
Sorry,
Last
Dan.
time.
Perhaps we could insert some sort of simple language to allow for a continuance of debate post those 2 items if there's a vote and approval, as Jim recommended.
Insert something to extend debate, basically, by a vote of the council.
By a vote of the council.
If that's your preference, they're your rules. If that's what you like as a consensus of the committee, I have no problem putting that in there.
Is that okay with folks? Aaron?
I just want to make sure I understand that what you're proposing is that you can have 5 minutes, each person can have 5 minutes twice, and if there's something that absolutely has to go forward, then we could make a motion, or we could extend that debate for the individual to have more time than that. The reason why I was putting up the issue about the 5 minutes, because it just seems on paper like that's a long time. My experience here tells me that rarely does any one particular individual speak for 5 minutes. Or maybe Eric Jacobson. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding, y'all. I think it's rare that we have someone speak actually for 5 minutes each time, but so I don't know. I'm just trying to, if the whole idea is around making streamlining the meetings so that they're more efficient, then it just seems like, I don't know, giving each person 10 minutes, that if you wanted to, you could use 10 minutes, right? You know what I mean? That seems like a lot on any one particular topic. So I'm okay with it where it is, and if we have to make a change, I guess we could always, if we had a meeting and everybody just started going on for 6 or 7 minutes, I guess at the next meeting, we could move that down to 3 minutes and cut off the debate. We could, because we can do that, right? Yes, Jim, right.
You can always,
Okay,
somebody can always move to cut off debate.
all right.
It's called calling the question.
All right.
Okay.
So
So
what-
I think there's...
Point of order here. If you could just clarify what you want added here, if
I
anything.
think there's some staff direction, or some direction to include something that would allow the extension of debate.
I would also
So noted.
I would also support maybe 3 minutes instead of 5. I think most of us are mostly succinct and can make our point in 3 minutes.
Is there consensus for 3 minutes instead of 5?
I say yes.
Okay. Okay with me.
I actually agree.
All right.
That wasn't a colossal waste of time, then, was it?
Okay, so I'll change it
On
to 3.
4, somebody pointed out a typo. Mayor pointed out a typo, I believe it was. Resolution. As I say, the only real change here is to reflect that things come to the council that don't first start out in the committee, such as zoning and historic preservation. There are probably a couple of others in the city ordinances that provide for that.
Okay, Charlie?
Well, what I was going to point out was that it's not clear that ordinances, for example, have to start in committee. Or, resolutions that have been discussed by the boards and commissions at one point were being brought to council without sufficient time to think and discuss them. So it's sort of I think we need to, I'd like to do a little more historical understanding of why, we have a procedure of ordinances and resolutions starting in committee, or you're starting from committee, but occasionally they come directly to council. Probably the recommendation is that resolutions and ordinances do start in council, or do start in committee. You had an example tonight from the Traffic Commission of an ordinance that, had needed, that you want to see more discussion of. So it was sent back to Traffic Commission, and it was done at a committee meeting. So I think, in general, you want things to start at the committee level, but occasionally there are things that come from boards and commissions that have a time requirement, for example, and that's why I'm suggesting a slight change here to the resolution on resolutions that would allow boards and commissions to send things directly to council if so needed.
There's even more to it than that, because some of our ordinances specifically state, like in the zoning ordinance, specifically state that certain of Plan Commissioner or Zoning Board of Appeals decisions, historic preservation decisions, that particular ordinance says it then goes to the council. Doesn't say it goes to the committee. Unfortunately, the Muni Code, Illinois Municipal Code, I'll call it an introductory section, references ordinances, resolutions, and motions, and that section doesn't make a distinction or create a sense of hierarchy insofar as, which has a higher priority. But elsewhere throughout the Muni Code, there are certain sections in the Muni Code that where you have to take action has to be by ordinance. For instance, adopting the budget. It says by ordinance. It doesn't say by resolution, I believe. And there are many of these sections throughout the lengthy Muni Code where one of those words, one of those three words is used. And that's why they're designated. Typically, at least since I've been here, when there is an action that is to, unless it's specifically prescribed otherwise in the Illinois Municipal Code, if there's an action that goes into our Urbana City Code that's published by Muni Code, that's our host online service, or is going to govern conduct of the citizenry, guests, businesses, etc., typically it's done by ordinance. If you're approving an agreement, you could do that by ordinance if you want. It wouldn't be published in the online Muni Code, but typically that's done by resolution. For example, again tonight, the housing matter that was before you, you recommended that a resolution go on to council. The traffic code, that's in our code of ordinances, so that's why that was crafted or drafted as an ordinance. Whenever you have an ordinance, though, and you want to amend it, it's got to be amended by an ordinance.
Okay, any other questions on Rule 4?
I think we're on Rule 5.
Okay, we're on to Rule
Moving
5.
on.
I was wondering on that one if we could just add something after that paragraph that says, notwithstanding the foregoing, draft resolutions and ordinances may be considered without review.
Say that again. About you're talking about on Rule 5.
Rule number 5.
Yeah. Esther's recommendation.
Basically, yeah, to make sure that it's clear that this is a suggestion that you offer it for review, but it doesn't prevent you from offering a draft ordinance directly to the...
Again, the only reason why the staff component is in here is to provide consistency and to make sure that the resolution or the ordinance is in a lawful form. For instance, every so often, maybe a couple of times a year, I will see an ordinance that says, and be it resolved. It should be it ordained, and vice versa. It's a defective ordinance. And I'm not aware, at least the ones that I have drafted, that council members and others have and staff have asked me to draft, I have not changed the tenor, the intent, and I've tried to stick as best as possible to the language unless it's not clear and all. And I usually, I think almost always, send it back to the person who asked me to do the work for their review and comment on it. How others within the city do this, I can't speak for the other departments.
I just wonder if we could put something in there to make it clear that if someone didn't go through that review process, it wouldn't prevent them from
Well, I mean, you all can put anything you want, draft any resolution or ordinance that you want and put it on the agenda. And at some point after you pass it, I come back to you and say, by the way, it's not lawful. And then what are you going to do?
Or you could bring it up during the meeting or whatever, but I think what bothered Esther and what bothers me really would be this notion that you have to submit something for review and editing before it can ever get to the city council. And it's true, anything I've submitted, nothing's been held up. It's always been good suggestions and everything, but that doesn't mean that it would always be that way.
May I make a suggestion? That so you have consistency, that before any such ordinance or resolution that is proposed by an alder person or a committee member, that whoever prepares it, which often happens to be me, or one of my assistant city attorneys, but whoever prepares it on the staff sends it back to the person requesting it for review and comment and changes. But now you're getting into this issue of the mayor's authority versus the committee's authority and the council's authority, because while you all do approve our appointments, and we're very happy that you do, we actually do report to the mayor, not because she's necessarily the mayor, but she's the head of the executive branch, or she's the CEO of the city in terms of the actual day-to-day operations of the city. She's the executive branch, you all are the legislative branch. So we would be considered, using a federal model, we would be considered cabinet agencies that report to the president, not the Congress.
So I guess that's maybe another reason why we wouldn't submit it for review.
Bill?
That's fine.
If I could make a suggestion, I think the intent here is just to edit to conform with the forms of our resolutions and ordinances. So if we could remove the for review and comment, and just for editing to conform with the format of our resolutions and ordinances.
Dennis?
Could we then have available to us online a template which we can simply add words to?
Absolutely. We have a style guide and everything. We have the and at any time you want one, you can email myself or either Wendy or Kay, and we will provide it to you. We have it on the city drive, accessible to all staff.
Well, then it would be nice to be accessible to us as well, because I wouldn't know where to look for that.
But
And
yeah,
apparently
you
it's a
don't
staff
you don't
tool.
have access to it, but we can put it somewhere where you would have access.
Yeah, because then we could take the format and put in the information that we wish to
Yes,
present,
we can.
and it would be in the
We'll find a
form.
location for it and make it available. But so my suggestion would just simply be, if you want to provide us a draft, we can edit it to conform to the style. We can take out the words
Comment.
we'll just take out the words review and comment. So just for editing, to conform with the format.
I mean, I think the wording's fine. I think it's a good suggestion to do this. I just don't think it should be a requirement.
Well, it
I
says
mean,
and has a draft. It's only if you have a draft. If you don't have a draft, then it becomes a discussion item or something you show up with at council to present to to committee or council. So it's if you have a draft, we can include it in the packet so it gets emailed out, or it gets emailed out and put on the website in advance. If you don't have a draft, you don't have a draft. It still goes on the agenda.
But if you give us a template, we'll have a good draft. And it won't
Absolutely,
have to
absolutely,
be.
absolutely.
So I'd rather go that route.
We will provide you templates.
Ma'am, because, again, hopefully you'll follow, the templates and pick the proper template. But may I suggest the following language? Forward it to the appropriate city staff person for editing to conform with conform with, or not conform with, but to assure that the same is in proper legal form. So there's no editing in terms of just putting it in a legal form with proper whereases, as well as be it ordained, and then the proper language at the end for signature.
Dennis?
This is a discussion. I don't know. I just think that just even doing that sort of stifles the purpose of being able to bring things freely to the city council. I think that if I'm not really all that keen about having people manipulate or massage the initial discussion or the initial draft brought. But I don't mind it being improved if it's sent to staff for consideration or for development, as long as the main points of the presentation are expressed, from the voice and the viewpoint of the author.
From a drafting standpoint, if at all, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I don't think staff drafts memos and all, and certainly I don't think staff contributes to debate, but if you're talking about the content of the resolution or ordinance itself, then I understand.
That's what I'm talking about.
We can strike all the language, and then you all will work with strike with this reference to the staff altogether.
I think it should be up to the individual who brings it forth. If they feel confident that they can format it in a way that's pretty illegible and intelligent, and you wouldn't want it to be held up just because you're using the word resolved instead of ordained. That can be fixed later once the discussion is open and there's been discussion, and perhaps the items need to be prepared after debate into a format perhaps by staff to bring it forward again to the city council.
Dean?
I think I like Dennis's version of it best if you can have the option, because my reasoning for running it by staff would be to improve it, to look for holes in the language. So I'd like to at least have the option to do that. And obviously, if you're the author of it, you're going to be able to reject or dispute any changes that staff might want to suggest, right?
If the committee of the whole recommends a resolution or an ordinance move on to the council, then that's the language that moves on to the council, and staff, unless directed to do so, as happens periodically, should not be making any changes to what the council, because then you really are changing what the committee has recommended to the council. The purpose of this, at least as it was drafted, or at least the intent was not to control language, but hopefully to work with, they all go to the clerk to start out with, because the clerk has to put them on the agenda. But the purpose is to work with whoever wants the action to be memorialized in writing, and then it should go back. As I say, I don't know about the other staff, but I send things back to you all and say, essentially, is this what you want, or review and comment, or do with it as you wish? And if I've missed the intent of what you're trying to do, I've never had a council member or committee member be shy about telling me. I welcome that, because it is, from my perspective, I draft what you want, not what I want, because that's not my role. I'm not a decider. I'm merely, in this case, a scrivener and putting it in some kind of a logical format.
Jared?
I've got a suggestion on language then, maybe, Charlie. So maybe in the third line where it says, or said member shall provide a copy of the same to the city clerk, who shall, at the direction of the authoring alderperson, in turn forward it to city staff for review. So you put that language in there, and then it's got to be you who tells them, I want you to send this to staff for, and then I would also still strike review, comment, and, just as Jim said, leave the word editing, and then strike that whole line where it says conform with the intent, blah, 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 and just skip to assure that the same is in proper legal form. So we strike the whole language about review and all that stuff because I think it's inherent. And assuming it's proper legal form. You disagree, Bill? You give me side eye.
Yeah, I'm okay with the language. I just think it should be optional, but,
Well, that's what,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
That first part, same as city clerk who shall, at the direction of the authoring alderperson, send it to staff. So you could just send it to Charlie and be like, I don't want this to go to staff. I just want it to come up as it is. But if you want to direct it, then you can direct it.
okay. And then, I mean, if the committee decides that it's not in legal form, wants to send it back to the committee, they can do that and ask for staff review or whatever. But the first time in the committee, it makes sense to, I mean, if you want to, the only time I can think that ever came up was maybe with the IHSA resolution where, you know, members of the council wanted something the mayor didn't, and the mayor directs staff, so then you have a little problem. But all the others that we've submitted, they've always been reviewed, and it's never been a problem. But you can see that issue potentially being a problem. Dennis?
You know, I can just say that if the proposal is significantly large, you're going to be waiting a couple months for staff to come back to you with the corrected draft because of their workload. And it's in one way of losing a momentum or having something buried. And, you know, this has happened for me, you know, this last year. And I'm, you know, I mean, I could see that this could be a way of something just getting lost in the process because of staff time problems. I'm not talking about a two-page memo. I'm talking about something more significant.
So to expedite the process, would my fellow council members support additional language in there to offer the optional send to council, but not make it requirements in the initial part of the language?
Is there a consensus on that? Anybody have any problems with that? Okay, so that fix the language to make that happen. Okay.
I got what Jared said. Mostly we'll review the tape and get the wording to work. We'll make it optional and we'll provide the templates.
Okay.
Rule 7, or excuse me, Rule 6, appointments. The only real change here is if there's a reappointment, the requirement for a curriculum vitae or a resume is not required because presumably by then you will know your appointees. Going on to Rule 8, Committee of the Whole Chair. This was just clean up and hopefully a little more delineation. But I don't think there are any substantive changes except for possibly D, which is just above Rule 8. The Committee of the Whole is not vested with the authority to take final action. We all know that, but in that rule should be memorialized. All proposed motions, resolutions, ordinances which receive a second shall be voted upon by voice vote. That's what you already do. If it is unclear as to the tally of the votes by voice, then it can be done by a show of hands. Now, since I've been here for 4.5 years, it's never been unclear, but there's always a possibility, especially if it's a 4-3 vote or a 3-4 vote. Or if the mayor is voting on that one, a 4-4 vote. Well, that's the council, in a council meeting. Rule 8, group presentation time limits. That's those who come here to make presentations to you all. That's what that's directed at. And that is, again, I believe there was a rule on that. It's, again, a clarification and expansion. At least since I've been here, some of these presentations have just gone on and on and on with people saying the exact same thing over and over in 3 or 4 different ways, but with no real substantive change. So this provides some limits on them. And if you want to change you want to change the limits on them, you're certainly free to do that. And some people show up with 2 or 3 people who do the presentation.
Any questions on that one?
I'm okay with the language in that.
Charlie?
Yeah, well, the original reason I was asking here was for invited presentations too. What kind of time limits do you want to give to invited presentations? You know, if you have UBA or EDC or one of those, you know, or some other group that comes in that you've invited, what's their time limit?
Yeah, this one seems to only address those during public input.
Right.
But for the ones on the agenda as presentations, typically I think sometimes the chair kind of says you have 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or they agree beforehand how much time they're going to use. Do we want to, you're asking, do we want to set a hard time limit on that?
Well, you know, originally it was public input, it was my thinking on it was for presentations. Invited presentations should have a suggested time limit. And, you know, and that's where the 10 and 20 minutes came in. That original discussion was for invited presentations that are different from public input type presentations. So so if this is just for public input, then we don't need, then we can strike the or by prior arrangement of the chair of the committee, the mayor. I was trying to address invited presentations too.
Aaron?
Okay, so one of the things that Esther put forth early this evening was in relationship to us making sure that we clarify our roles and that we all operate within those roles. And I'm increasingly concerned that, I mean, if Charlie, as the city clerk, if you're putting something on the agenda for us to discuss, I don't see it how it's consistent with what we were just talking about tonight, for you to be so involved in the discussion that's taking place. If you're putting something forth for the council to discuss, then it's for us to discuss. But for Charlie, for you to be so involved in the discussion, I think that's, I see that as out of order on some level. So if we're discussing this, it's for us to discuss as the legislative body, to put forth what we want to do. If he puts it on the agenda, that's one thing, but to be a part of the discussion, he's not a council member anymore.
I think he was explaining the reasoning behind the rules that he was proposing.
But he's been a part of this conversation for quite a while, and I just don't think that's appropriate. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Mary Alice?
I was just going to say, I mean, Charlie is the person who's kind of in charge of keeping us with all the rules and so forth, so I think that, at least for this component, you know, he's been offering the rationale behind why certain language was proposed and so forth, and since this is his item, it makes sense to me that he would offer that. From what I'm hearing from you, Aaron, you're saying that in addition to things that he puts on the agenda or requests for us to look at, you feel that there's additional input that may not be necessary. Is that correct? I called you by your name, so you can respond.
Yeah, and no, I want to be very clear that I understand that there's a transition from a council member who has been on the council for a long, long time, and it may be difficult to not chime in and be a part of some of these discussions. But I'm seeing an increasing and a consistent participation in the discussions and the debates that are taking place. And it seems to be that's what I'm seeing happen here. If it's on the agenda as something that is put forth as an explanation maybe at first, but to continue to going back and forth as a part of the discussion, I think that's out of order for this position.
Do any members think that we need to clarify the group presentation time limits to include invited group presentations? Mayor?
I would recommend invited presentations be given 10 minutes. You can always vote to extend, but given our past experience with presentations and then questions, I think 10 minutes is a reasonable time.
Is that okay with everyone?
I would
Just to make sure I understand, it would be 1, 2, 3, fourth line down, change 5 to 10? Is that what's being recommended?
Well,
No.
This whole paragraph seems to be saying during the public input portion, but we have presentations that are invited that aren't in the public input portion. They're under a separate agenda item called presentations.
Right.
And this doesn't specifically address that, I don't think. It seems to only address,
Now, this deals with the agenda item, public input. So what you would like is either something put into this for invited presentations, or do you want a separate rule on that, which would be a new rule 9? No.
we could just include.
Just put it
invited
in here.
presentations, yeah. Okay, and those were all the changes. The others were not changes, right?
All right, and that's 10 minutes. Well, and then, of course, Rule 9 is your favorite rule. 1, there are no changes. And 2, if you choose to ignore all of these other rules, it's not going to affect the legal effect.
Right,
I mean,
that's good to
obviously,
know.
the votes still have to be counted.
Okay.
What
so-
I will do is I will prepare another draft of this. I will delete the underline of all the portions you've accepted. I will provide you legislative draft for the changes. And what I will do is I will send it out to everyone, to all committee council members and all. I ask you not to talk among yourselves other than on 2 people at a time, because you do have an Open Meetings Act issue. So I'll say, don't reply all. You can send your comments to me if I've messed up somewhere, and I probably will.
Okay, thank you. Dean?
Regarding rule number 9, I've been waiting for this the whole time here. This what's kept me clinging to life. And I agree that just because a procedure wasn't followed, that what am I trying to say? The legal standing, thank you, of what you've done should not be, taken away from. However, my question is, what sanctions are there for someone who does not, follow the rules whatsoever? Is there any sanctions, any consequences at all?
No, but what you can do is typically where you see abuses with the rules is in debates or discussion. There can always be a motion to close debate, and if you get the support of, if you move to close debate or call the question, you still have to, there has to be a motion and a second on that, and if the council, and that's that motion both of those motions take precedence, and then the debate doesn't continue, and there's no debate on those motions. A motion to close debate needs a second, and then there's a vote. And if it passes, debate is closed. Now, if the person just doesn't adhere to that, I don't know what you do other than bind and gag them.
You can also appeal the decision of the chair. So if the chair is letting someone go on too long, you can make a motion to appeal the decision of the chair, and I think that's a majority vote to overrule the chair, basically. Something
Well,
like that.
yeah, I mean, but, yeah, I'll have to look at, to overrule the chair. I don't know if that's a majority vote or a
2/3.
supermajority.
Okay. So we need a motion for resolution with changes.
So, reading at the end of it, I believe that it's recommended that we keep it in committee. And I'd make a motion to keep this in committee for the changes to continue and further discussion to occur.
Okay, so we'll discuss it again in committee. Is there any discussion on this?
As I recall, your rules provide if 2 people recommend keeping something in committee the first time, and I think this is the first time for this, isn't it?
It's a second.
That's only a council rule.
Okay, so it's been moved by Jared, seconded by Mary Alice to keep this in committee. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries, and seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.